Welcome back to the Athlete's Edge podcast. Today's episode, we're going to discuss our Instagram post that took off and was shared by multiple coaches, colleges, and performance staff, and also my recent holiday to America, which followed that exact theme of what we posted. So, as I mentioned, we had one of our Instagram posts absolutely blow up over Christmas, and it was about how the Christmas break can either make or break you as an athlete. We talked about how holidays remove structure, and when your routine disappears, your habits get exposed. Sleep gets messy, nutrition drops, training disappears, and consistency goes out the window. A lot of coaches, colleges, and performance staff shared and agreed with our message, whereas some parents disagreed and said their kids need a break. So what's your take on it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think obviously everyone's entitled to their opinion, so it was good to see kind of both sides of the argument. Sort of my take, I think when it's like coaches, like colleges, even like college Instagram accounts were sharing it, obviously a lot of performance-based personnel, I think they're resharing it because they've seen the same things we see, have the same frustrations, the same challenges around just athletes that are inconsistent and all the challenges we have because they want results. We can't get them there if they don't show up and they're not consistent. Obviously, we talk about the injury risk a lot with being inconsistent. So, we'll get into it off the break, but people like, yep, I have a week off, and then the whole mindset of all or nothing, I'm back, let's go. It's like, well, now I've got to ease you back in. I've got to scale everything because you've had time off. So I 100% see where they come from, hence why we did the post, because a lot of the frustrations and the conversations we have all the time. I see the parent side. Some of the conversation replies I had, I do think parents are missing the mark, and I think a lot of it comes off the back of potentially one of two things. Either the kids are getting it wrong all year and therefore they need a break. So I don't disagree, they probably need a break, but that doesn't, I replied on a couple, two wrongs don't make a right. If you get it wrong for 330 days, the 30 days doesn't necessarily make, the 30-day break, isn't all, it might be the solution there, but is it necessarily the right thing to do? Because you shouldn't need it if the other 330 days. So I replied to a few saying, well, every second day should be a break. And that should just be year long. You can have Christmas Day off, but that's sort of part of your every second day off. Most people, the best athletes we've worked with, are just consistent 365 days of the year. And that doesn't mean they train every day. It means they're managing week after week after week the whole year. The other thing is I just think parents get tired, and I think they use school holidays as a break for themselves. As a parent, I don't think our kids could suffer in a way because of maybe our failures in the past or what we've done, thinking that we're right. I think we should be looking at how can we do it better, because we know a lot of the kids just follow sort of the same paths as their parents because it's the environment they're in.
And I think it's super relevant, especially we talked about in that post about how different physical qualities decay at different speeds. So speed will start to decay after 5 days compared to endurance and max strength, which is more about kind of 30 days. And where most athletes go wrong is, kind of you mentioned it there, they either do absolutely nothing or absolutely smash themselves. So we've seen the 100-100s is pretty popular over the sort of Christmas break. So either people burn themselves out or they lose all their momentum. And this is quite topical at the moment, especially in the AFL with the recent news of multiple ACLs and soft tissue injuries in the first week back of pre-season. So what is the performance reality of taking a break?
Well, I think the first thing is things like the 100-100s come about because people aren't in routine. So there's no real consequence from doing it. Because if you're not training structured wise, you're just haphazardly throwing sessions together over the next week or two. Then if you need to, you can take 5 days off. But when we talk qualities, like you said, speed decays between 2 and 7 days, top speed, max velocity, sprinting. And a lot of that is because it's a coordination type issue. Now we think of coordination and skill in a sports skill, like shooting a jump shot or kicking a footy and that sort of stuff. And yes, some people don't do it well and we need to keep improving. But because kids are playing their sport a few times a week, you don't necessarily notice at that macro level a deterioration in skill. They might be a little bit off some sessions, but they kind of get it back because they're exposed to it a lot. Whereas if you're not sprinting regularly and being consistent with that, then you might still be able to run, but you just see that the output's not there. And so off the back of that, when we're trying to make small changes, a small step back that then we've got to catch up and then make inroads that are really hard to get, sets us back sets us back in a big way, because it's so hard to improve anyway. We've had a few that have had to have time away because families have gone away, and that's fine. And they've come back after 2-3 weeks of not sprinting. The comment is often always, geez, that feels weird. Like sprinting feels foreign. It's still running, but because of the requirement on the body of top speed running, it feels like they're doing running for the first time in their life. Because things like your timing, your rhythm, all that stuff starts to disappear. From an injury perspective, a couple of chats we've had is, I think something that people miss the mark on, and we've discussed before, is the other thing with consistency is it keeps things like your speed exposure, just your chronic training load, fairly level, because it's a change in load. Well, high loads aren't the problem. It's changes in load and big changes. And so what tends to happen is people will come back into training and go, oh, that was a big jump up, bit tired, so they'll manage themselves pretty well, and then almost relax on it thinking, yeah, I've kind of got through that first week. But what they forget is most injuries from a load spike happen at about week 3 and 4. So then by that point, they've almost forgotten about their inconsistent period or their break. They've got back into training, and then they almost blame the training. It's like, well, it's actually the break that happened a month ago that's the problem. Which we're seeing now, AFL players even at the elite level coming back after some time off, away from the club anyway, and we're seeing some big injuries happening at the moment.
So what are the, AFL players who are elite athletes, what are they missing over the Christmas break?
Well, if you think, so even elite athletes don't necessarily fully understand what to do and how to do it and why they do things, because a lot of it's given to them. So they get set programs, they go away. The really diligent ones probably spend more time understanding why and asking the questions, so they probably do it better. But there's a lot that, I just follow in the program because they're not accountable and they don't have routines. Are they doing it exactly as they're supposed to? My experience, no. Potentially doing only what they like doing or are good at doing. So there's probably big gaps just even in the program they've been set. And even that program, if they did it really well, you don't have things like a lot of high speed running. You're not going to have really hard changes of direction and in the sport context, because you're not doing footy drills. You're probably on your own doing a change of direction or doing a conditioning session or doing some skills, but it's not the same intensity as what training's got. They can do some gym. Even then, are they doing all that properly with no eyes on them? Potentially, maybe not in some things. Potentially, some conditioning and stuff. But even then, like sleep, food, they're not at the club, they're not in their normal routines. So all that stuff sort of can drop off a bit as well. So then they get back to the club, and then bang, this time of year they're getting ready for match sim, and breaking matches aren't far away in the season. So clubs are ramping things up pretty quick, and bodies aren't prepared. And
so you've kind of noticed this yourself over the Christmas period?
Yeah, so even getting ready for today, it's just when you're not in your normal routine, so your schedule's not the same. I'm pretty consistent, very consistent with my sleep and everything, but your food, being at the gym, not being at the gym over the holidays and that sort of stuff, it just, you don't feel as sharp, you don't think as clearly. As a result, efficiency's not the same, everything just takes that little bit longer, and it's definitely no different for an athlete where, speed and forces and I guess the stakes are so much higher because not only performance, but the injury risk that comes with playing sport, which you've had to manage because you've obviously just had to jump back into training, having been away. So you've been over to the States, which, you've done the West and the East Coast. So you've moved time zones. You've been in pretty good weather, I'd imagine, in LA, even in winter, but some Boston winter, New York winter. So what was the coldest day?
Top of minus 16 was the coldest
Top
in
of
Boston.
minus 16, yeah. Which makes it hard to find training. Well, makes it hard to do training, to get outdoors, to do a lot of the stuff that we sort of preach about being consistent on. So what was your mindset and your approach to training while you were over in America?
Yeah, so for context, my brother and I went to America with a group of friends for about 3 weeks. Oscar and I had always wanted to travel to America because we were massive NFL and NBA fans. We wanted to do a bit of a white Christmas in New York, which was, such an unreal experience to travel overseas for the first time and experience snow for the first time and just sort of immerse yourself in that culture. So I consider myself, very lucky to have had that privilege because not everyone gets to. So you kind of touched on it, but we did 5 major cities in 3 weeks. So it was pretty fast paced. There's a lot to do and a lot to see in that short period of time. So there was definitely a lot of reasons and I guess excuses not to train. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to what you value because we tend to make room for the things that we do value. And for me, I value my training, and because I've trained consistently over the last 5 to 6 years, doing nothing was never really an option for me. So one, because it's so ingrained in such a habit, first of all, but it's also just so powerful mentally and just sort of getting your day started. So there were nights where the others went out drinking and I decided to get an early night so I could train the next morning. And people would look at that like a sacrifice, but for me, I didn't really sort of view it as a sacrifice. That was a conscious decision that I made to sort of, maximise my training. And so I was happy to quote unquote sort of sacrifice those couple of late nights going out and drinking because those activities don't really align with my values and I don't actually enjoy it a hell of a lot. So now definitely there were late nights where either travel where we didn't get in until 2 a.m. on a couple of trips because we had delayed flights and that kind of thing. There was a couple of nights where I did go out and have a couple, but I didn't really let that stop me from getting up the next morning. Now, it was definitely a little harder to get up that next morning off about sort of 3 hours sleep and changing time zones. Yep. But for me, I think where there's a will, there's a way.
So how, and I know a bit of obviously your preparation, but what did you do in advance to prepare to train over there?
Essentially, I knew that going in that my training would be somewhat compromised and that I'd kind of have to be prepared and sort of make do with what I had. Essentially, what I did was look up where we were staying in advance so I could organise where I could train. So in LA and Boston, we stayed in Airbnbs, which was about a 20-minute walk from LA Fitness in Hollywood. So I signed up for a 3-day membership pass there. In Boston, I signed up to Planet Fitness, which was, again, about another 20-minute walk. Obviously, it was a bit more colder in Boston compared to LA, that walk. And then in Vegas, Chicago, and New York, where we stayed, we were in hotels. So the first thing I do when I get to the lobby is, ask where the gym is, go check out the equipment, see what I can sort of, I guess, what I've got to work with, and, go from there.
So we've discussed that given the climate, some of your sprinting stuff was hard, but talk us through what your training did look like. And I guess from a speed perspective, when we've mentioned that it's the fastest quality to decay, what did you do to, I guess, maintain that as best you could?
So what I did do, obviously, you kind of mentioned it there, with the speed stuff being a bit tough, I just alternated cardio and gym sort of every day.
Yep.
Because we stayed in all the major cities, I didn't really have easy access to an oval, and when I did, it was sort of covered in snow or minus 10 degrees. So I didn't really get to do any top speed running as much just because the treadmills would only cap out at a certain speed. So I knew that going in, I was going to have to make some adjustments to the program based on the equipment and facilities that I had available. So I was able to do about 80 to 90% of the program, like the normal gym program that I would do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I was probably able to do about 80, 90% of it, make some slight modifications based on, if I can't do a certain exercise, it might be going from barbell to a dumbbell, those kind of things, or maybe an alternative exercise that achieves and accomplishes the same goal. So that's kind of what we did. I know we kind of talked about before I went away was around continuing to train that sort of change of direction, deceleration, getting those exposures. Obviously with the top speed stuff being a bit harder, I try to have a sort of key focus on some of the lateral stuff, even in my warm-ups with the plyometrics, some sort of jumps, some landing, all that kind of stuff I made sure to have.
So keeping some exposure. So doing something still explosive, which even local athletes, obviously not ours because we program a lot of that stuff, but particularly don't do anything explosive outside of their sport training. And even then, maybe don't do anything explosive in their sport training. But obviously made that a focus in around our velocity block and some plyos, that sort of stuff. Obviously, we've got some mobility already in there. There's obviously strength movements, that sort of stuff. So you're ticking off a lot of the boxes there. How did you do a lot of your cardio stuff?
So a lot of cardio stuff was out on pretty much on the treadmill. There was one run that I got out and did in Central Park, which was about 0 degrees, but I had a couple of layers on. So it was like, it was a nice day, nice morning. But yeah, heated up pretty quick, that's for sure. So a lot of the stuff I did was some of the Norwegian runs that we had done in the past, a bit more longer interval, but also tried to, as best I could, do some sort of a bit more MAS stuff as well around the sort of 15 on, 15 off, trying to keep some level of high speed in there. Yep. Obviously it would only reach a certain point, but that was kind of what I tried to get done with from a cardio point of view. And
which leads into nutrition. So probably the cardio was a big important part of the training to offset some of the nutrition, given you're on the road and in the United States. How'd you go?
Yeah, definitely. The 20,000 steps a day helped somewhat. Like, a bit of a background story. So I used to have a really sweet tooth growing up. Like, I used to be that bad to the point where I'd have 12 Weet-Bix, tablespoon of sugar on each. Really bad. Then I got into my training where I became a lot more disciplined with my food and went from having a really sweet tooth to the kind of polar opposite of eating clean, not touching it. So yeah, even on Christmas, I wouldn't touch it. Mum and Oscar would always think I'm pretty silly, but now I'm still very consistent with that and what I eat and still eating very clean. However, I'm not as strict when I go out occasionally, but even that's still pretty rare. So over the off season, I kind of went in with the plan of losing 4 to 5 kilos for a couple of reasons. One, more so for footy and trying to get a bit lighter, help with my running for the wing position, but also because I sort of knew in the back of my mind, going to the States, there's probably a lot of temptations that I know I'm just going to sort of enjoy myself and indulge in their food and try some stuff. So there was a lot of fast food, pizza, bagels, pasta, sweets, all that kind of thing. And as a result of eating poorly and a lack of sleep, I actually got sick on the last day of the trip, which I don't usually get sick at all. So it just kind of goes to show how important the sleep and nutrition and being in routine is, because by the end of the trip, I was sort of craving healthy food and just dying to get back into some routine and some normality of, what I've sort of been doing the last 4 to 5 years.
Yep. I think a big one, and you probably, because you're so consistent, but seeing you before you went and how diligent you were, like we had staff breakfast and you were like, I've already had breakfast. You said no to free bacon and eggs. Like you were, this is my calories for the day. This is my routine. I'm sticking to it, because you had a goal to get to a certain weight so that you knew you could enjoy yourself in America. And so what were you before? What did you get down to? And what have you come back as from a body weight perspective?
So it was pretty much about 81 kilos to finish the season.
Yep.
Got down to as low as 76, but probably left about 76 and a half when I left Australia. Came back at about sort of 79, so about 2 kilos, 2.5. And now I'm sort of back down to sort of between 78, 79, where I'm kind of probably happy with. I found that just sort of being at that weight, I've actually probably felt a bit better running anyway, just a bit more energy. 76 was probably maybe a little bit kind of on the low end. Yep. So I feel like it's kind of worked out perfectly.
And I bring that up because the common thing would be go at 81, come back at 83, 84, and then almost be like, oh, I'm here now. And then some people then just sabotage themselves further because now they're out of their routine. They've been making poor food choices, so that just keeps climbing. Or at best, they kind of get back to 81 and then find it really hard. And in a way, almost write a whole season of sport off because of it. Whereas you sort of, you talk about it's not sacrificing because you value it so much, which I really like. And then for what you had to do for 6 weeks, essentially meant now you're actually ahead of where you were before you went away.
Yeah, so I'm still
it's actually a win.
Yeah, I'm still 2 or 3 kilos ahead of the off season. So which is a great result.
So how have you found your training since you've been back?
Training's been good. I've been consistent with the gym, obviously, so kind of hit the ground running there. Nothing really too dissimilar. Maybe didn't go as heavy as what I'm sort of used to, but I was sort of keen to see where my speed times were and where that's at. Obviously, first speed session was last Thursday, so I was kind of operating about 80-90%, just trying to sort of ease back into things. And I think it's always that kind of sprinting when you're relaxed, you always end up sort of running a pretty decent time. So even at 90%, I was kind of hitting a pretty decent speed still.
Yeah. Went far off, yeah.
Yeah, went far off the sort of PB and what I've sort of been averaging around the last before I sort of went away. And then
but we'd expect a little bit of a drop off in that anyway, because you haven't been able, as much as you've tried to keep max velocity qualities in your training, you haven't been able to do it. So, but that's all right. But like you said, you've been trying to do some other things, and we know things like strength and a lot of our gym-based movements and our plyometrics do relate more closely to things like acceleration, deceleration, change of direction. How have you gone in the first 2 sessions back with those things?
Yeah, so PB, my sort of change of direction, acceleration time that we do through the gates. So got a 5.00 where I think my previous best was maybe 5.1 something potentially. So to PB that, was a good result. And then also, I was sort of operating it a bit more closer to my 100% on Tuesday, and ran a 1.12 off the sort of fly 40 or 30, I think it was. So,
which I think would have been our quickest time out of all our athletes on that morning. So that's solid. That's moving. Yeah.
So pretty happy with that. Not too far off my best as well. So I think it's, even when I had my back injury last year and missed probably like even more months, I reckon it was probably 3 or 4 months before I had sprinted again.
Yeah.
Although my times, I can't actually remember too much, but I think the technique, it's because it's so ingrained and I've been sort of doing it so consistently over the last 4 to 5 years, it's kind of, just muscle memory.
I was going to say, it's probably 2 points. It's what you do in the short term and how consistent you've been over the last few months, and obviously while you're away, not undoing all the years of good work. But at the same time, because you've got that body of work and these years of working really hard and being consistent and being really diligent with your intent around your technique and getting stronger, getting faster, looking after yourself, it's also more hardwired. So therefore, you see the benefit. Whereas this is why even with the younger athletes, I can make a case that at 12, 13, you're way, going back to our Instagram post, is it the end of the world if they have a month off? Probably not. But I guess the point, to sum it all up, is what's the message that's setting? Because at 12, 13, is it okay? At 13 or 14, it's probably going to be okay. And all of a sudden, they're 18 and they don't know what consistency looks like. So the lesson, like for me, I'm trying to teach that to my 4-year-old around being consistent and having routine and, bed routines. And we know that, like, even at that age, if we stick to our bedtime routine and brushing the teeth and when they get into bed and reading a book and all this sort of stuff, how much easier it is. The second we go off that, it's a nightmare. I've got to wrestle a freaking crocodile to get him into bed because he just, he's out of routine. I think from my perspective, to sum it off, I think one of the most undervalued traits athletes have is their consistency. It's the reason why we're sitting here doing that, because we actually started out as coach and athlete. And the second I knew you're available for a job, you were straight in, because I know how hard you work. Your consistency is something like, as a business owner, as an employer, it's so important as a trait in what we look for with our staff. So this is just, I guess, bigger than sport. That main thing is that consistency. And for parents, it's what are we teaching our kids? For the kids and the athletes themselves, it's the only way to get results. It's consistency over intensity every day of the week.